You think intelligence is about IQ scores and good grades, right? Wrong. Here's what psychologists won't tell you up front. The smartest person in the room can slowly become the dumbest without even knowing it, and it has nothing to do with how they were born. See, intelligence isn't fixed. Your daily habits are literally rewiring your brain right now. Every choice you make either sharpens your thinking or quietly dulls it. And the scary part? Most people are stuck in patterns that psychologists have identified as silent killers of mental sharpness. Today, you're going to discover the everyday habits that are secretly lowering your intelligence. These aren't obvious things like dropping out of school. These are the invisible patterns hiding in plain sight, the ones most people defend without realizing they're making themselves less smart every single day. Welcome to ThinkWise, where we break down the raw psychology shaping your everyday life. So let's dive into the habits psychologists say quietly reveal low intelligence. Habit 1. Picture this. Someone won't take an important meeting because their horoscope said it's a bad day, or they knock on wood every time they mention good news, genuinely believing it protects them. Here's what psychology tells us. Research shows that people who rely heavily on superstitions struggle with something called causal reasoning. That's your brain's ability to understand what actually causes what. When you believe a lucky shirt determines your success, you're training your brain to ignore real patterns and logic. This lowers intelligence because your brain stops looking for actual solutions. Instead of preparing for that test, you're counting on lucky charms. Instead of analyzing why you failed, you blame Mercury being in retrograde. Your mental muscles weaken because you're not using them. Intelligent people do the opposite. They look for real causes. They ask, what can I control? What actually affects the outcome? They build mental models based on evidence, not magic. Habit 2. You've heard people brag about sleeping only 4 hours, acting like it's a badge of honor. They're on their phones until 2 a.m., then drag themselves through the day on coffee. Neuroscience is crystal clear here. When you don't sleep enough, your brain can't clean itself. During sleep, your brain washes away toxic proteins and consolidates memories. Without it, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and complex thinking, literally shuts down. This kills intelligence because you're operating on a damaged processor. Your attention span shrinks. Your problem-solving abilities tank. Information doesn't stick in your memory. You're basically making yourself dumber every time you sacrifice sleep. Smart people treat sleep like fuel. They know that 8 hours of rest gives them sharper thinking for 16 hours of action. They protect their sleep schedule because they understand their brain needs it to function. Habit 3. Some people panic when they're alone. They always need background noise, constant company, or their phone in their hand. Complete silence makes them uncomfortable. Psychology calls this solitude anxiety. Studies show that people who can't be alone with their thoughts struggle with self-reflection and deep processing. Your brain needs quiet time to organize information, make connections, and develop original thoughts. This habit lowers intelligence because your brain never gets to think deeply. You're always in shallow processing mode, reacting to external noise instead of creating internal insights. The ability to sit with complex ideas and work through problems requires solitude. Intelligent people actively seek alone time. They take walks without headphones. They sit with their thoughts. They know that breakthrough ideas come from giving their mind space to wander and connect dots. Habit 4. Imagine someone whose conversations never go beyond weather, gossip, or surface-level comments about TV shows. Every discussion stays safe and shallow. Research in cognitive psychology shows that the complexity of your conversations directly affects your cognitive abilities. When you only engage in simple exchanges, you're not exercising critical thinking, abstract reasoning, or perspective taking. This impacts intelligence because your brain adapts to what you use it for. Stick to small talk and your ability to handle complex ideas weakens. You lose the mental stamina for deep discussions, nuanced thinking, and intellectual challenges. People with higher intelligence engage with difficult topics. They ask why, they explore different viewpoints, and they're comfortable with conversations that challenge their thinking. They use dialogue as a gym for their mind. Habit 5. You know that person who speaks with absolute certainty about topics they barely understand? They have strong opinions on economics despite never studying it, or they're convinced they could run a company better than the CEO after reading one article. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. Psychologist studies show that people with limited knowledge often have the most confidence because they don't know enough to recognize what they don't know. Real experts, meanwhile, tend to be more humble because they understand the complexity. This crushes intelligence because you stop learning. If you think you already know everything, why would you seek new information? Why would you question your assumptions? Your growth stops completely. Intelligent people are comfortable saying, "I don't know." They recognize the limits of their knowledge. They ask questions, seek expertise, and update their beliefs when presented with new evidence. Their confidence comes from understanding, not ignorance.
Habit 6. Some people follow rules without ever questioning why they exist. If it's the policy, they do it, even when it makes no sense in context. They never ask why or consider if there's a better way. Psychology research on cognitive flexibility shows that rigid rule following without understanding indicates low adaptive intelligence. Smart systems and smart people know when to bend rules for better outcomes. This limits intelligence because you're operating on autopilot instead of critical thinking. You're not analyzing situations, weighing options, or using judgment. You're just following scripts, which means your reasoning skills deteriorate. Intelligent people understand the principles behind rules. They follow them when they make sense, but aren't afraid to question inefficient systems. They think contextually, not just procedurally. Habit 7. Picture someone who believes every wild conspiracy theory they encounter online. Everything is a cover-up. Nothing happens by accident. Every event has a secret explanation that only they know. Cognitive psychology links conspiracy thinking to pattern recognition gone wrong. These individuals see connections that don't exist and reject actual evidence in favor of complicated plots. Studies show this correlates with lower analytical thinking skills. This destroys intelligence because you're training your brain to reject logic and evidence. You dismiss facts that contradict your beliefs. You build a worldview on fantasy rather than reality, making you worse at navigating actual problems. Smart people think probabilistically. They evaluate evidence. They know that sometimes things happen without grand schemes. They change their minds when facts demand it, rather than doubling down on disproven theories. Habit 8. There are people who always approach problems the same way. They have one method for everything and get frustrated when circumstances require adaptation. "This is how I've always done it," is their motto. Research on cognitive flexibility shows that intelligence isn't just what you know, but how adaptable your thinking is. Rigid thinkers struggle with novel situations and complex problems that require creative approaches. This habit lowers intelligence because the world constantly changes. If you can't adapt your thinking, you can't solve new problems. You become less effective over time as your rigid methods face evolving challenges. Intelligent people are mental acrobats. They try different approaches. They learn from failures. They know multiple ways to solve problems and can switch strategies when needed. Their strength is adaptation. Habit 9. Remember the famous marshmallow test? Kids who could wait for 2 marshmallows instead of eating one immediately showed better life outcomes. Now apply this to adults who can't delay any satisfaction. They impulse buy. They binge watch instead of studying. They choose pleasure now over rewards later. Psychological research consistently links delayed gratification to higher intelligence and success. Your prefrontal cortex, the smart part of your brain, handles impulse control and long-term thinking. This kills intelligence because you're never building anything meaningful. Learning requires sustained effort. Mastery takes time. Achievement demands sacrifice. When you always choose immediate pleasure, you never develop the discipline for complex goals. Intelligent people play the long game. They invest time in learning skills that pay off years later. They endure short-term discomfort for long-term growth. They know that intelligence itself is built through sustained effort, not quick wins. Habit 10. You've met them, people who wait for their turn to talk rather than actually listening. They interrupt, finish your sentences, or mentally prepare their response while you're speaking. Communication research shows that poor listening correlates with lower cognitive empathy and information processing. When you don't truly listen, you miss nuance, context, and the opportunity to learn from others' perspectives. This impacts intelligence because you're closing yourself off from new information. Every conversation could teach you something, but you're too busy broadcasting to receive. You stay stuck in your existing knowledge. Smart people listen more than they speak. They ask clarifying questions. They seek to understand before being understood. They know that the fastest way to learn is to tap into other people's experiences and insights. Habit 11. It's midnight. Someone is on their 7th hour of scrolling through social media, watching random videos, consuming content that provides no value. They can't stop even though they feel worse with each swipe. Neuroscience shows that constant content consumption without reflection creates what researchers call cognitive overload. Your brain gets stuck in passive consumption mode, never processing or creating. The information flows through without leaving lasting knowledge. This destroys intelligence because you're training your brain to be a passive receiver, not an active thinker. You're consuming hundreds of shallow pieces of information instead of deeply understanding a few important concepts.
Intelligent people are selective consumers. They read books, not just headlines. They take breaks to think about what they've learned. They produce ideas, not just consume them. They know that intelligence requires depth, not breadth. Habit 12. Some people chase every trend without thinking. Whatever's popular, they do. Whatever everyone believes, they believe. They never pause to ask if it aligns with their values or makes sense for them. Social psychology research shows that excessive conformity without critical evaluation indicates weak independent thinking. Following the crowd isn't always wrong, but doing it blindly means you're outsourcing your judgment. This lowers intelligence because you never develop your own analytical framework. You're letting others think for you. Over time, your ability to form independent judgments and evaluate information critically weakens from lack of use. Smart people think independently. They evaluate trends critically. They adopt what makes sense and ignore what doesn't, regardless of popularity. They're comfortable standing alone when their analysis leads them there. Habit 13. There's a difference between gaming strategically and gaming mindlessly. Some people spend hours on repetitive games that require no learning, no skill development, no mental challenge. It's pure escapism with zero cognitive benefit. Neuroscience shows that while certain games can enhance problem solving and reaction time, mindless gaming is just that, mindless. Your brain isn't being challenged or growing. It's being numbed. This impacts intelligence because you're spending massive amounts of time in activities that don't build cognitive abilities. Those hours could be spent learning skills, solving real problems, or engaging in activities that stretch your mind. Intelligent people are intentional with their time. If they game, they choose strategy games or learning experiences. They know that what you do with your free time either sharpens you or dulls you. There's no neutral. Here's the truth that might sting. Low intelligence is not about being born less smart. It's about the invisible habits you repeat every single day. You weren't born doing these things. You learn them, you practice them, and they're quietly rewiring your brain. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity. That means it physically changes based on what you do repeatedly. Every time you choose instant gratification over delayed reward, your brain rewires to crave shortcuts. Every time you accept information without questioning it, your critical thinking muscles atrophy. Keep the wrong habits and your brain adopts to stay stuck. It becomes efficient at being ineffective. The pathways that support deep thinking, creativity, and problem solving weaken because you're not using them. But here's the powerful part. This works both ways. Change your habits and you literally rebuild your brain. Start questioning assumptions and your analytical circuits strengthen. Practice delayed gratification and your impulse control improves. Seek solitude for deep thinking, and your brain learns to process complex ideas. Intelligence isn't fixed. It's not determined at birth. It's built through the daily choices you make, the habits you keep, the patterns you repeat. And the question is, are you building or destroying? Most people will watch this video, feel uncomfortable, and go right back to their old patterns. They'll defend their habits, make excuses, and stay exactly where they are. Average. But if you're here watching this channel, you're different. You want to think wise. You understand that growth is uncomfortable, that truth isn't always pleasant, that real self-improvement starts with facing the patterns you've been blind to. So here's what I want you to do. Pick one habit from this list. Just one. The one that hit the hardest. The one you recognized in yourself. And decide today that you're done with it. If this video opened your eyes to the psychology most people ignore, subscribe for more raw truths about how your mind actually works. We don't do feel-good fluff here. We do real psychology that changes lives. Intelligence isn't about IQ tests or degrees. It's about habits and adaptability. It's about the choices you make when no one's watching. It's about whether you're willing to question yourself, challenge your patterns, and grow past your comfort zone. Break the invisible habits. Rewire your brain. Step into intelligence most people never reach, not because they can't, but because they won't examine the daily patterns keeping them stuck. You're better than that. This is Think Wise, because every choice either sharpens your mind or dulls it. The choice is yours.